wageni wakaribishwa Kilimanjaro, hakuna matata, hakuna matata,
Shira tukalala,
hakuna matata,
Kawa tukapita,
hakuna matata,
Angwa tukalala,
hakuna matata. Jambo bwana, habari gani? Nzuri sana. Wageni wakaribishwa Kilimanjaro, hakuna matata,
Anga tulilala,
hakuna matata,
sasa ni barafu,
hakuna matata,
ui ni uhuru,
hakuna matata. Jambo bwana, habari gani? Nzuri sana. Wageni wakaribishwa Kilimanjaro, hakuna matata. Kilimanjaro, mlima mrefu sana. Kilimanjaro, mlima mrefu sana. Na mawenzi, mlima mrefu sana. Ewe nyoka, mbona wanizunguka? Kulila nyama, mbona wanizunguka?
Hello, everyone. Welcome to tonight's live stream. I wanted to kick off tonight's live stream, our Q&A about climbing Mount Kilimanjaro with that video, because it was such a special moment for me and the other 23 women who were there in that tent, listening to our guides sing to us before we started our summit night climb up to the top of Mount Kilimanjaro. It was such a special moment. We were all bundled up because it was pretty chilly at our camp. We were bundled up, we were eating dinner, and our guides came in and they sang to us and they talked to us about what summit night would feel like, what it would be like, and what we would experience. And so I just wanted to share that moment with you. And I hope that someday, if climbing Kilimanjaro is on your bucket list, especially with a group of women like we have here at Hike Like a Woman, I hope that you might consider climbing Kilimanjaro with us or within another company. But my goal tonight is to not take up too much of your time, but I have 13 questions that I've received in my inbox, in DMs, all about climbing Kilimanjaro. And these are some questions that are a little more personal and questions that are difficult to find answers to if you just do a Google search. You almost need to climb the mountain to know the answers to these questions. So tonight, I'm just going to answer these questions, giving you my perspective. So I'm one woman who climbed Mount Kilimanjaro with a big group from Hike Like a Woman in June. I did the 7-day Machame route, and it was an incredible experience. And so tonight I'm just going to answer these questions. I do want to say that this is my experience, and I think everyone on our group had a different experience climbing Kilimanjaro. And just if you're new here at Hike Like a Woman, you may or you may not know me, but my name's Rebecca. I started Hike Like a Woman about a decade ago. My goal is to break down barriers to entering the outdoors and help women get outside and explore with confidence. And we do that by leading guided trips all over the world. And so I'm 45 years old. I'm not an elite athlete. I'm a few pounds overweight. I'm a breast cancer survivor. In fact, 2 years ago, I had a bald head from chemotherapy, and I was so sick during and after chemotherapy that just to walk around the block was hard for me. And my husband and kids would have to walk along with me because I was just so weak. So what I really want you to take out of this tonight is that I believe anyone can climb Kilimanjaro if you have two things: time to train and grit to keep on going. And so I just want you to keep that in perspective as I go through the questions that I've been asked recently. Also, I do have the comments pulled up. So if you have any comments, questions as I go through the presentation tonight, it'll probably be, 30, 45 minutes. Feel free to drop them in the chat. I'd love if this could be a community discussion. We have people joining us on our Facebook page and on our YouTube channel. I will say that if you're watching this on Facebook, It is going to disappear first thing tomorrow morning, and we're going to direct people to our YouTube channel. So you'll only be able to watch it on Facebook until I wake up tomorrow morning and decide I want to come to work. So let's just dive right in with these questions. I have some slides here. Let me add the slides. I don't have a ton of slides, but one of the biggest questions we got frequently before our climb from our group, so we had 24 women on our trip, were what were the toilets like on Kilimanjaro? And this is really interesting that toilets were one of the biggest concerns that women had about the climb. And I think that's because there's a lot of misconceptions or rumors or just like things we don't know. And so I will say toilets are a big deal on Mount Kilimanjaro, and human waste is a big deal. The guiding company that we used provided private toilets. So for our group, we had 5 toilet tents. So these little tents, they had a toilet inside of them. It was basically like a big bucket with a cushy toilet seat on it. And then so when you had to go to the bathroom, you could just go in and go to the bathroom like using an outhouse. They were cleaned. They were very sanitary. And then yeah, pretty comfortable. There were outhouses at most of our camps and along the trail. The outhouses were squat toilets, and they weren't super duper clean. And so I think that's where the toilet thing comes up a lot about Mount Kilimanjaro. They were pretty dirty. I used one once and I was like, I'd rather just go to the bathroom behind a tree. So I will say we used Zara as our tour company. I highly recommend Zara Tours. It is a woman-owned tour company, and she does a ton of charity within Tanzania. And I'll get to that in just a little bit. But toilets were part of the package that we had booked, these private portable toilets. So if you're climbing Kilimanjaro with me, you will have private portable toilets. It'll be no problem along the way. If you choose another company, I would just ask to make sure that a private toilet is included as part of your tour package. As far as going to the bathroom when you're not at camp, so when you're hiking, it's basically just like a hike at home. It's find a tree, find a rock, find a bush. I think in most places, everyone in our group was able to find a little bit of privacy when we needed to go to the bathroom. Of course, always packing out our toilet paper because we didn't want to leave anything on the mountain that we didn't bring. Like, we wanted to leave the mountain better than we found it. So packing out toilet paper is really important on Kilimanjaro. Our guides were really great because we had, I think we had 13 guides and 73 porters. And so our guides would say water in when they would want us to drink water and hydrate. And then they'd say water out when it was time to go to the bathroom. So if we needed to go to the bathroom, we would just say, hey, can we stop? I need to water out. And it was like this little language that we had, water in, water out. It was pretty cute. I've been trying to apply that to family hikes with my kids and say water in, water out. But if we were in an area where there wasn't a lot of privacy to go to the bathroom, not a lot of vegetation or rocks, then our guides, it was like they were professional guides, not just at getting us to the top of Mount Kilimanjaro, but they were also very professional when it came to just turning away and ignoring us and not looking in the direction we were going to the bathroom. So I don't think going to the bathroom on Kilimanjaro is like a big thing, but it's really not that big of a thing. Just need to practice going outside if you're not used to that. Some women did have something like a Go Girl or a Freshette, or there's another brand, a Shiwi. So this is just a female urinary device that you can use to go to the bathroom standing up. I brought one and I never used it just because I was comfortable squatting to go to the bathroom. But most women who brought them did use their FUDs. So if you do get a FUD, make sure you use it at home so you practice. There's a little bit of skill to it. Let's move on. So hygiene is another topic that we get a lot of questions about. Someone asked if there were sinks or showers at camp and how do you wash up? I wish that it was just like rolling into a KOA every night at camp, but it's not. It's pretty dirty and dusty. Every night when we would get into our camp, our cooks would bring us a bowl of warm water so we could washy-washy. And we could wash our face, our hands, our feet, whatever we needed to clean. And then again in the morning, they would deliver tea to our tent or coffee, which was so delightful. And then also a bowl of warm water so that we could wash as well. Our guides and porters, or our guides especially, seemed interested. They wanted to make sure that we stayed healthy on the mountain. And so being able to wash was an important part of our overall health and hygiene. At our camp, we did have big buckets outside of the dining tent with soap and water so we could wash our hands. Some guiding companies do provide showers, so they will hull up water and then heat the water so you can take a shower on Kilimanjaro. We were not that bougie, and honestly, I didn't really see the point of taking a shower on Kilimanjaro. I never really felt like super icky, gross, and grimy. We were able to just keep pretty clean until the last a couple days. Once we started coming off the summit, there was a lot of dust, and then I just felt like this nice layer of grime got on my body. But yeah, hygiene is, as long as you're going with a guiding company that provides those services, you'll be able to maintain a fairly high level of cleanliness on the trail. I've gotten a lot more disgusting just backpacking in my local mountains than I did on Kilimanjaro. Next up was a question about chafing. So my thighs rub together when I hike, and I've also experienced some chafing on my shoulders from my backpack straps in the past. And so I wanted to make sure that as I was training to climb Kilimanjaro, I was training with the gear that I would be carrying, the load that I would be carrying on my back. And so I didn't experience any chafing where I typically do on my shoulder straps. And then as far as leg chafing goes, on the first night through the first day through the rainforest, a lot of women wore shorts because it was hot and kind of sweaty and humid that day. I chose to wear pants because I found that that's just kind of what works for me. Also, I didn't want to get any bug bites, but we'll talk about that in just a second. So there's a few products you can use to prevent chafing, like Body Glide or what's the nut butter. My husband likes nut butter. And then I've also used Neosporin from my first aid kit in a pinch if I do feel some rubbing. So there's things you could do, but I would say just like train at home how you're with the gear that you're going to use on the mountain with the clothing that you're going to wear, and just see what rubs and how to prevent that. Just in your training hikes, just know your gear, right? Know your clothing, know your gear. And I talked about bugs. One question that we get asked a lot is, gotta hydrate, water in. It's about bugs. I did not get a single bug bite when I was on Kilimanjaro. Not a single. I didn't hear a mosquito. I didn't see any mosquitoes. I didn't notice any bugs. And I don't know if that's maybe because of altitude and the cold temperatures, but I didn't get any bug bites. Where I did get bug bites, and this is really important, was actually at our hotel. Our hotel had this really cool outdoor patio bar thing where we could sit out and get a drink and talk. So we sat out on the patio the night before our climb. And then we sat out on the patio again the night after our climb. And I got a ton of mosquito bites just along my ankles and on my feet. So so next year I'm going to put bug spray on for the hotel, but not necessarily, I don't even think I'm going to take it during the climb. But I also climbed the first part in June, and I don't know what the bug situation is going to be like next year because we're going to be doing the Kilimanjaro climb the last week in August. So I'll have to do a little bit more research, but I didn't notice the bugs at all. And I guess if you were on the trip with me and you got bug bites, let me know, because I'm just curious if anybody else out there got bug bites. Another question that I've received was about safety. And this question was, did I feel safe in Tanzania? And did I feel safe when I was at camp? This is such a cool question and such a good question, because I honestly think that my husband was more concerned with my safety than I was. Maybe I'm just a little bit It'll all work out. But once I arrived in Tanzania, I actually felt very safe. So Zara, the guiding company that we used, they actually have an office right at the Kilimanjaro International Airport. So when we landed, they were tracking everyone's flights. And when we landed, there was someone from Zara holding a sign with our name on it, and our driver was ready to take us right to the hotel. And once we got to the hotel, we were able to check in, and the hotel was gated in Moshi. So we were in this very safe area. I felt like we were very safe. And then the day before, the morning of the climb, we were able to lock up any valuables we didn't want to have on the trail with us, like our passports and our cash, our credit cards, all of our valuable things. We were able to lock those up in a safe at the hotel. So it was really neat. It was like they gave us a little space that would fit. I like just fit my fanny pack in it with all of my stuff. So you put your stuff into a locker, and they give you the key to the locker, and then they lock it like a safe. So there's two locks between our passport. And so I liked that. I felt like when I was on the climb, I didn't have to worry about my money. I didn't have to worry about my passport because it was very secure. And then most of us had a duffel bag with clothing that we had worn to travel. And so that clothing, that duffel bag was locked up again, not behind another lock, just one lock on the door. But a lot of people used locks on their luggage inside of that room. But I felt like there was like one person in the hotel who had control of the key, and I felt like it was very safe leaving our stuff behind while we were on the mountain. When we were actually on the trail at our camps, there's a lot of people hiking Kilimanjaro, and the camps are very busy. There's a lot of porters, there's a lot of guides, there's a lot of cooks, and then there's a lot of people like us who are clients and who are climbing the mountain. I found that most people just tended to stay within their own camp. We didn't really wander and socialize too much. Well, one girl did. She went to go see the Frenchmen who were celebrating a birthday and had a fun time with them. And I love you, Erin. But most of the time we stayed within our camp groups. And I felt really safe at camp. I didn't really have any valuables at camp. I mean, it was just my camping gear and my dirty clothing. And I heard, I'm not sure if this is true, but I did hear that someone was always awake at our camps. And so I don't know if the porters had some sort of a night watch or something like that, but I don't feel like they left the tents and our gear unattended. There was always activity and always people, and they were keeping an eye on what was going on around us. And so as far as safety goes, I felt probably more safe in Moshi and on Kilimanjaro than I do in most large cities in the United States. That's not to say that I would just walk around and not take a local with me, but I felt very safe personally. And and I think that most women who went with us had that same experience. But if you didn't, I'd also love to know about that. Moving on from safety. Did the food or water make you sick? This is a good question as well, because I did not get sick on Kilimanjaro, and we had some women who had some mild stomach upset. There was a little bit of diarrhea the first couple of days of the trip. And it's hard to tell if that upset stomach was coming from food or water, if it was coming from Diox or Malarone. We'll talk about those in a second. It's hard to tell if it was coming from altitude or if it was just working out, the travel, adjusting to new foods, new time zone, all of the things. So it's hard to say if food or water made people in our group sick. I don't think it did. And I was kind of as the leader of the group, I was kind of snooping around, seeing what the cooks were doing and how the cleanliness of their hands. Like I was checking things out because I've been a guide for a decade and I've been an outfitter for a long time, and so I was kind of checking out the camp hygiene systems, and I felt comfortable with them. I felt like the guides were there to make sure that we were healthy and strong because they want us to get to the summit of Kilimanjaro. So then they can say that their guiding company has a 90% summit rate or an 86% summit rate. So they're very vested in getting us to the peak. And so I think that the guides were doing everything that they could to make sure that we were healthy. And that includes having good hygiene, food, cleanliness standards on the mountain. I was going to say something else here. Oh, some people have said that they get filtered water from their cooks, and then they would filter it again themselves. And I didn't think that was necessary. I thought that the water that they gave us, that they had filtered and boiled and strained, I thought that was sufficient. I had my Steri pen just in case I felt like I needed to give the water a little zap before I drank it, but I never used it. So I don't think the food or water was bad for our group. And that once again goes back to the guiding company and what you choose. There's a lot of people that are like, oh, what's the cheapest way that I can climb Mount Kilimanjaro? But this isn't a mountain you want to mess around with. It's a mountain where you get what you pay for. So it's worth investing a little bit more money into a guiding company that has a really good reputation, that's going to have all those cleanliness standards and practices, and good guides that are going to take care of you. So that's my spiel on food and water on the mountain. One thing that I did say, this kind of leads into the next question that I have here. Water in a second. I'm drinking water with lime juice. It's not a mojito, but I wish it was. Was the food good? So the food at our hotel before and after the climb was delicious. There was a lot of it. It was buffet style. So I was just trying to make sure that hot food was kept hot and cold food was kept cold, and that I wasn't eating food that had been left out, because all the meals are served outdoors at the hotel. But as far as the food on the mountain, I thought it was better than your typical backpackers pantry chili mac. We had food like every night when we would roll into our camp, every afternoon we'd roll into our camp, and at 5 p.m. they would have our cooks would have these giant platters of popcorn and cookies. And so we would drink hot chocolate, and we would eat chocolate, and we would eat popcorn, and then we would have dinner. Dinner would always be something. We'd always start with soup, and then, potatoes, rice, chicken, a lot of chicken. We ate a lot of chicken. We had like watermelon, veggies, and also our cooks were really good about making sure that people who had dietary restrictions or preferences, like I'm allergic to nuts, they were really good at making sure that everybody was taken care of and had adequate food. So dinner was usually pretty big and tasty. Breakfast was usually some sort of crepe and sausage and some fruit. And then lunch was usually a packed lunch, or sometimes we would stop and eat lunch, especially if we are one of the higher places where they wanted us to acclimate a little bit and try to generate a little more red blood cells before we came down to camp. So then they would cook a hot lunch. My most memorable lunch was at Lava Tower, or just before Lava Tower, where we had pizza for lunch and watermelon, and that was a really delicious lunch. So I thought the food was pretty good, but I'm not a picky eater. I have 2 children that are extremely picky eaters. And I was like, if we ever climb Mount Kilimanjaro, I'm just going to have to pack nothing but Doritos in their backpacks. So I'm winning at motherhood. Did I get altitude sickness? Another question that comes up a lot is altitude sickness. So Mount Kilimanjaro, the summit is over 19,000 feet. It is extremely high. It's the highest that I've ever been in my life. And so I think as I was kind of gauging how everybody was feeling before we started our climb, altitude sickness and getting sick from the altitude and just like not knowing how our bodies were going to perform at altitude was, I think, most people's number one concern, because it was unknown, right? You don't know how your body's going to perform at 19,000 feet if you've never been to 19,000 feet. So there's this element of uncertainty, and that's very scary. And also, if you watch a lot of YouTube videos, there's a lot of people throwing up and getting sick on Kilimanjaro. And I think a lot of times that's a little bit embellished and a little bit over the top. So one of the reasons that we chose as an organization here the 7-day Machame route was because of the mountaineering philosophy to climb high and sleep low. So we would climb high during the day, and then we would come back down and sleep low. So that gives your body a chance to acclimate. And then, of course, summit night is just going to be difficult. Like, there's no way around it. So the 7-day Machame route was like a great route for acclimating. There's a few other routes that I think are good for acclimating, but it goes back to, do you want to do a cheaper 5-day climb and just be miserable because you're sick the whole time? Or do you want to spend a few $100 more and do a 7, 8-day, 9-day climb where you might not feel as lousy because you're acclimating a little slower? So that's something to think about when you're booking your Kilimanjaro climb. Another thing is, I want to mention that our guides were so professional and so good about knowing how we as like American tourists would adapt to altitude. So pole pole is something you hear over and over and over again during your climb. It just means slowly, slowly. And hiking slowly, slowly really gives your body a chance to acclimate, because you want to produce all of those extra red blood cells, and you get, it's like blood doping. So you got to get up high to get those red blood cells. There is this really tricky balance mentally with altitude, because, I'm trying to think how to say this. So in my own life, when I've been really scared about something and thought a lot about something negative happening to me, that negative thing always happens to me. It's like the power of the mind. If I'm just like, oh, I'm going to have a lousy day because I didn't sleep well, blah, 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 then I have a lousy day because I didn't sleep well. It's like this self-fulfilling prophecy. But then there's this other aspect where being aware of your body and aware of how you're feeling is really important. So on Kilimanjaro, it was this careful balance with trying to be present and not think about how our bodies were going to feel at 19,000 feet. So trying to not work ourselves up or get so anxious or so scared of the altitude that we weren't like actually enjoying the climb, but also being aware of how the altitude was making us feel. I will say I didn't have any problems at all with altitude sickness. I didn't get a headache till the last day, and that's because I wasn't drinking enough water. I didn't have any stomach upset. I take that back. On summit night, I did have a little stomach upset kind of right before sunrise, and I think I was just in my head. We did have some women have some stomach problems, like I mentioned before, at altitude, and some headaches. And, that's really just part of climbing Kilimanjaro. But if you start off on a Kilimanjaro being scared of the altitude or freaked out about the altitude, like, it's just going to be a little more difficult. So just understanding that it's just like, be here, be where your boots are, and it will be okay. It will all be okay. Another thing that I think really helped with altitude sickness was training. There are some really fascinating studies, and I do have a bachelor's degree in exercise science, but that was so 20 years ago, and so much has changed, and I've forgotten so much because it's not a degree I use. But there are some interesting studies about the correlation between your VO2 max and how your body processes oxygen, and altitude sickness. So that's something I'm doing a little more research on now, and it's just a really interesting thing. And And I also will say that just because I personally didn't experience altitude sickness this year, it could be completely different next year. You just don't know. It's just one of those things. So that's going to lead us into this second question that I have right here about Diox. So Diox is a prescription medication that reduces the effects or prevents altitude sickness. There's been a lot of news about Diox. It's a prescription drug, so you need to go to your doctor and talk to him about climbing Kilimanjaro and taking Diox. Also, I think if you're allergic to penicillin, I could be wrong about this, then I think you can't take Diox. I'll follow up with that. But anyway, Diox has some really funky side effects. What I noticed personally as a side effect from Diox is that my face got a little tingly and twitchy. It was actually kind of fun. And also my fingers got a little bit tingly. So that was very minor. And one of the side effects of Diox is also frequent urination, but we were all drinking so much water and so much tea on Kilimanjaro that I think it's hard to tell if that was from the Diox or just because we were so well hydrated. I don't know. So one thing that I did with Diox that I think is important to do and not something that my physician told me to do was I actually took it for 24 hours a couple days before I left for Kilimanjaro because I wanted to just do a test run at home to see how it would make me feel. And, do it or don't do it. But I think that's important to do with any prescription medication before you travel to another country. So I did a little Diox test run and I was like, yeah, it's fine. I can do it. There were several women on our trip who couldn't take Diox because of allergies, or they just found that it was making them feel kind of icky. But they still made it to the top. They still made it to the summit. So I think it's just one of those extra things. It's like one of those extra tools in the toolkit that can increase your chances of success on Kilimanjaro. And also, I want to say, I talk about the summit a lot, but success doesn't always mean reaching the summit. Success just means reaching your goal on Kilimanjaro. We had one woman in our group who did the Bronco Wall, and that was her definition of success. And after the Bronco Wall, she was like, I'm done. I don't want to make a summit attempt. I got what I needed out of this trip. I accomplished what I came here to accomplish. And so she headed back down. And that was great because she understood her body and she knew what success would mean for her. So let's go back to Diox. One thing that I also want to mention with Diox is my doctor prescribed Diox right here. And she prescribed 250 milligrams twice a day. She prescribed 125 milligrams twice a day, but this is a 250 milligram tablet. So I had to split the pills before I went to Tanzania. So if you don't do the test run, you might get a dosage that's too high for you and you might have to split the pills. And I'd hate for you to be at Camp 1 trying to figure out how to split a pill with your pocket knife. So double check the dosage, and that's just something to be aware of that I was glad I caught before I went to Kilimanjaro. There's also a really fascinating study about ibuprofen being, just slightly less effective than Diox. And so I think some women in our group who couldn't take Diox were taking ibuprofen regularly, which also, there's some stomach issues that can happen with ibuprofen, but it does have fewer side effects than Diox. But there's studies out there showing that it is almost as effective as Diox. I'm going to do more research on that because I'm just curious about that, because also ibuprofen is a lot cheaper than a prescription for Diox. So that's Diox. I do want to say some people were on a prescription for Malarone, which is a pill to prevent malaria. My doctor didn't think I needed to take Malarone because I wasn't doing a safari. I was going to be higher on the mountain where mosquitoes weren't a really big threat. But if you're going to be lower, then your doctor might recommend Malarone. the interesting thing with these anti-malarial drugs is that a lot of their side effects can mimic altitude sickness. So a little bit of headaches, a little bit of stomach ache. So when I talk about altitude sickness and not really knowing if people were suffering from altitude sickness, there's just a whole lot at play here when you're climbing Kilimanjaro. So maybe someone was having symptoms that felt like altitude sickness, but really it was a side effect from malaria pill. I don't know, but there's just a lot to think about when it comes to your body and knowing your body. So as you're training to climb Kilimanjaro, and as I was training, I was just kind of getting used to my new post-cancer body. I was like, hey, Rebecca, how are you feeling today? I'm feeling great. So it's just knowing how your body is going to react when you're doing some of those longer, more difficult training hikes leading up to your climb. All right, how's everybody doing? Everybody staying with me? Okay, we're driving on. Okay, summit nights. You climb Mount Kilimanjaro at night, and I don't really know why you climb at night. Some people say it's so you don't see how steep the final push to the summit is. Some people just say because it's cool temperatures. So I don't really know, but you start climbing the summit. Your summit attempt, I think our group started around 11 p.m. Some people start at midnight, some people start at 1 in the morning, 2 in the morning. It really just depends how fast your group was moving. Our group was not moving fast at all, but we were having a ton of fun. So summit night is cold, and it's going to be cold because you start at 15,000 feet, above 15,000 feet, and you get up to 19,341 feet. So it's never going to be nice, balmy conditions at those high altitudes. And I can't really give you advice for staying warm because every body is different. I tend to run a little hot. I'm a furnace. And I also live in a cold, windy place. So I spend a lot of time outside in the cold. I would say when it comes to summit night, just make sure you have really good warm clothing and put on every layer of clothing that you wear. If it's a clear night, it is going to be a cold night. We had a really clear night, which was beautiful because we could see the stars. And it was hard to tell where the stars ended and the headlamps began, but it was chilly. So put on every piece of clothing that you brought with you, keep on moving. Our guides also had hot ginger tea, which tasted really good in the middle of the night, especially at altitude. Ginger is super good for that stomach upset from whatever's going on. And I will say my hardest time on Kilimanjaro occurred about the hour before the sun came up. I was a little cold, not super cold, but I was just tired of walking and I just didn't want to walk uphill anymore. But as soon as the sun came out, it really boosted everyone's morale in the group. And Bob, when I was in the Army, we used to call the sun the Bob, the big orange ball. And it makes you really understand why ancient people worshiped the sun, because the sun just brought warmth. But as we were coming down the summit early in the morning, after we'd reached the summit, it got hot and we were just shedding layers left and right as we were going down the mountain. And so that summit night, you'll experience really cold, but also you might get pretty hot descending. The next question is a little bit hard for me to talk about. So hang with me here. I got this question last week and it took me back a little bit here. So somebody asked if during our climb, we felt like we were exploiting porters. So our porters carried all of our clothing, our sleeping bags, everything we would need at camp. We carried our day packs with just what we need for the day. So they carried all the tents, all the sleeping pads, all the tables, all the chairs, all the water. Our porters worked really hard on the mountain. And so when I got this question, I didn't like the word exploiting because it made me feel a little bit uncomfortable. So I had to really go back and think about what it was like on the climb and think about the porters that we saw who were with our group, who worked for Zara Tours. And I guess here's my thoughts on porters, guides, choosing a guiding company, climbing Kilimanjaro, all those things. When you look for a guiding company, it's important to pay attention to that company and make sure that they are part of the KPAP, so the Kilimanjaro Porters Assistance Project, or the Mount Kilimanjaro Porters Society. KPAP gets a lot of love, but our guides and porters were part of the Mount Kilimanjaro Porters Society. So these associations, these societies are set up to make sure that porters are not exploited and treated unethically and poorly on Mount Kilimanjaro. This was a huge problem a while ago, but it's been cleaned up since then. We knew going into it that our porters were part of the Mount Kilimanjaro Porter Society. John, our head guide, is actually, I think, the secretary in that organization, and he has been for a long time, the past 20 years that he's been guiding on Kilimanjaro. So our companies are really took good care of their porters from what I was able to observe. And here's what I observed. I noticed that every time we stopped at a camp, there were weigh stations. So our porters' loads being weighed as they would leave camp in the morning and then as they would come into camp in the afternoon. So that meant to me that they weren't getting out on the trail and then some other porters dumping all of his gear onto some poor other porter, right? Like they left with the same load that they came back to camp with. And I observed that, and I appreciated that there were rangers weighing in their loads, at the start and the end of every hike. I also noticed something that I thought was pretty amazing that I didn't expect. The first night when we got into camp, we had someone in our group who had a little upset stomach. And so I went to our head guide and I said, hey, I got someone that's not feeling super good. What should I do? And he said, can you go and talk to her and see how she's doing and what she needs? And because I have a sick porter that I need to go talk to. So he said, my co-guide or my assistant guide can help you with the woman on your trip who's not feeling well, but I have to personally go take care of my porter. And I was so impressed that our head guide would put his porter to the top of the list to make sure that his porter was feeling better and do what he could to help his porter feel good. And so I was really impressed by the way that situation was handled. The woman in our group was fine. I'm a trained wilderness first responder. I had a very competent assistant guide with me. She just had a little stomach upset and it was great. It wasn't great. She was fine. So that's what I noticed about the guiding company that we used in particular, taking care of porters on the mountain. I also spent a lot of time with John, our lead guide. He walked with me the entire climb. And we were talking about his career, and he loves guiding people on Mount Kilimanjaro. And I asked him about the effects of COVID on tourism in Tanzania. And I pulled up some stats here. So tourism in Tanzania accounts for 17% of the national GDP, which is huge. And during COVID, 75% of guides, porters, and cooks on Kilimanjaro lost their jobs. And it's not like how things were here in the US where there was stimulus relief checks coming. I own an outdoor retail store, so I definitely felt the effects of that during COVID, but they didn't have that in Tanzania. So when we were there, when I think about how much money our group of 24 women put into the local economy, not just with the base cost of the trip, but also our tips, I felt like we were able to give a little boost to the local economy. And our porters kept saying that they were so thankful that we were there because we gave them a job. And we were so thankful to them for providing us the opportunity to climb Mount Kilimanjaro. And one thing that our group did which was really special, was on the last night we had a huge party, a huge celebration with our guides and porters, and several of us brought clothing items, coats, hats, socks, boots. Shout out to Alyssa. She brought like 2 duffel bags full of really high quality, good outdoor clothing and gear, and she just donated it to our porters and guides. And so our guides were so thankful to have these donations that they could take back to their porters to make sure everybody was taken care of. And so next year when I go back, I'm going to make sure that I'm bringing as much extra clothing and gear that I can to these porters who work so hard on the mountain. So yeah, this is a tough topic to discuss, but I felt like it was important not to hide this question, but just to be really transparent about porters on Kilimanjaro and my experience with that. So let's move on. Another question that I received a few weeks ago was asking me to be honest. Is climbing Kilimanjaro hard? Once again, this is just my perspective of climbing Kilimanjaro. As I said before, I'm not an elite athlete. I'm just like your average middle-aged woman. There were 3 things that were hard on Kilimanjaro for me. The first thing was making sure that everyone was having a good time and that everyone's voices felt heard and that everyone was seen and that that I felt like everyone was being taken care of. So that was a little bit tricky. There was one of me, and our guides were really like, they were focused on like getting us up the mountain, keeping us healthy, keeping us fed, making sure we had water. They were very focused on like the technical aspects of the climb. But some of those interpersonal things that can kind of bubble up when you have a large group of women, those were a little more complicated. So the hardest thing for me was managing like expectations and then making sure that everybody was taken care of on the climb. So that was the hardest thing for me. The second hardest thing for me was honestly 7 days of consecutive difficult hiking. It was hard, but I had done the work. I had trained, and everyone in our group had trained. We were physically prepared to climb this mountain. But what I wasn't prepared for was I honestly just got tired of hiking. And I know I own a company called Hike Like a Woman, blah, 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 hike, hike, hike. But I just got tired of hiking a little bit. And that's silly. And in fact, since I got home, I've had to force myself to go hiking because I just haven't felt like it. I just got tired of hiking. And then the third thing was something that I didn't really realize until last Thursday. So last Thursday, I met with a couple other women who climbed Kilimanjaro with me. One was visiting from out of town. So we went out for dinner and drinks. And Pippi, in her wisdom, said that she, like climbing Kilimanjaro was hard mentally to process after the climb because it's like for 7 days, you're in nature and all you're doing is walking. That's a lot of time to have like all sorts of other feelings and trauma and grief and all that stuff we push down. That's a lot of time for those like feelings and emotions to kind of bubble up to the surface because you're so like connected with your body and with this beautiful mountain and with all these things. And so I was not prepared for like the month after Kilimanjaro trying to process what we had just done and what we had just been through. So for me, it felt like coming home from a deployment to Iraq. You know, I used to be in the Army and I'd come home from a year in Iraq and I'd have to spend 3 or 4 months just processing what I had been through. If you've had a baby, it's kind of like that postpartum period where you bring this baby home and you're like, I did that and it was hard. And I love this kid, but what do I do now? Those were some of the feelings that I had coming off Kilimanjaro. Was just trying to process those big feelings and big emotions because they come up. And I think that that's not something people talk about when it comes to climbing Kilimanjaro. So next year, knowing that that's how I'm going to feel after Kilimanjaro, and that's how a lot of women in our group felt, I'm going to provide a little post Kilimanjaro support. Maybe we'll do some group calls, some group hangouts, whatever, to process those feelings. So as far as, is climbing Kilimanjaro hard? Yes, sometimes the interpersonal skills, the interpersonal stuff was a little bit hard. Hiking every day, a little boredom can be a little hard. And then coming home is also difficult. Also, because it's not like your friends know what you just did. It's hard to explain to your family what you just did. Yeah, it's just this reintegration back into society after 7 days, just being completely feral and wild. It's a beautiful thing. So there you go. That's my spiel. Those are the 13 biggest questions that I've received, questions that are a little bit awkward, maybe a little bit uncomfortable, but questions that I just wanted to publicly answer about our climb up Mount Kilimanjaro. I will say, and I've mentioned a couple of times, that we're headed back to climb Kilimanjaro in August next year. So August, almost 370 days away. We're gonna August 20th through the 28th. We're headed up to Kilimanjaro. We are doing the exact same route, the 7-day Machame route. We're going to have the same guiding company. We're using Zara Tours again because they were fantastic. I've been emailing John, our head guide. We have been chatting, and I hope he's going to be our guide again because he did such a wonderful job of handling such a large group of women. And so I'm feeling very excited to head back to Kilimanjaro. One thing that I did when I was on the mountain this time was I wrote down everything that I was feeling, everything that I was experiencing, all the gear that I was using, all the things, knowing that I'm going back next year. So I am much more prepared to go back next year. And the good thing is, if you're coming with me, if it's in your schedule and if you feel like it's something you want to do, I got the insider scoop now. So I'm happy to answer your questions about climbing Kilimanjaro if you have them. But anyway, if you want to learn more about our Kilimanjaro climb, you can find all of the trip information, route information over on our website, hikelikeawoman.com. I will say a couple things that we're going to do differently next year. And I might have talked about these a little bit earlier, is part of Zara Tours is that they do a lot of good charity in Tanzania. And Mama Zara, so Zara is the woman who owns Zara Tours, the guiding company that we use. And she started a school. It's a school for children in need in Moshi. It's the Moshi Kids Center. I was able to get a tour of this school the day before we started our climb. And it just really felt like a special place to me. And so I was talking to the person who was giving us the tour of the school, and I was asking what kind of services it provides for local children. So most of these children don't have a family. So I just felt this connection to this woman who owns a guiding company in Tanzania, who also uses her money to do all of these things. So I decided that we're going to donate $100 from every Hike Like a Woman trip sold to climb Kilimanjaro next August to the Moshi Kids Center. And that's going to be really special. So the average salary of a teacher is not very much, but if we sell out all 24 spots of our trip to climb Kilimanjaro next August, that is going to provide the annual salary for 2 teachers at the Moshi Kids Center. So that is going to do a lot of good in the community. Also next year, I mentioned a little bit that I was just struggled a little bit with some of the just like a large group and the dynamics of a large group. So we will have 2 trip leaders next year. So Erin, who came with us on our trip to Tanzania to climb Kilimanjaro this year, she's asked to come back next year and help out. So we will have 2 trip leaders, which will be fantastic. And I have spent the last month or so putting together a physical training program based off some of the deficiencies that I personally noticed when I climbed Kilimanjaro, and then packing list. So if you want, you can access our Kilimanjaro training program and packing list right now. Just head to our website, hikelikeawoman.com. You can click that, send me your Climb Kilimanjaro guide. And even if you're not signed up for the trip, even if you just want to get in shape, you can follow along the training program. Maybe you're not going to Kilimanjaro, but you're doing Everest Base Camp, or you're doing some other big mountain. Check out our training program, and it might be something that you can adapt for your own needs. Sam is my trainer. He put together a training plan that I followed before Kilimanjaro this year. And then I spent some time with him readjusting it for next year, now that I know what climbing the mountain is like. So head to our website, hikelikeawoman.com. You can download that. It's free. I just asked for an email address. So go check that out. And then here's what our little PDF guide looks like. Now, if Kilimanjaro is not your thing, I understand. It's a big mountain. It's a big commitment. Like I said before, you have to have time to train and then grit to just keep going on the mountain. We also do several other trips. And on Sunday, actually, I'm headed to Alaska for a Hike Like a Woman trip. So we're leading a trip to Alaska next week, and then Yellowstone the first week in September, and then we're headed to Peru in October. All three of those trips are sold out. We're going to Iceland in February, and Iceland is more of a van tour, it's not a hiking trip. We're going to stay in hotels. How fancy is that? And then in April, we're going to Costa Rica. Costa Rica is a really special trip for me. This will be our third trip there. And we work directly with the coolest Costa Rican guiding company ever. And that's an adventure trip. So whitewater rafting, zip lining. We do a night hike and look at all of the cool animals that come out at night in Costa Rica. A lot of swimming, a little bit of hiking. So that's a big adventure trip. And then we're going to southern Utah in June. So we're going to see 4 national parks on that trip. And then Kilimanjaro next August. And that's going to just about do it for the next year. So that is what we have going on here at Hike Like a Woman. I don't see any questions coming in about climbing Kilimanjaro, but if you have a question, let me just show you where you can send it here. I have someone helping me out who is in charge of this email account. So hi@hikelikeawoman.com is where you can send any questions. So if you have a question about any of our trips or hiking or Kilimanjaro in general, or you just want to chat, let me know. You can send us an email over there. I do have office hours every Tuesday and Thursday, so you can also sign up to book a call with me, because maybe you're like, I'd really like to climb Kilimanjaro, but I'm just not sure that I'm ready. I'd love to just chat with you about it. I want to make sure that the right people come on our trips. So I'm not about selling trips to everybody. I just want to make sure that it's a right fit for you. And that you know what you're getting into when you come on an epic adventure with me. So that is all I have for tonight. We are ending in under an hour. I'll leave it open for 30 more seconds here. If you have any questions, drop them in the comments. I'll do one quick check of the comments. And this is going to be disappearing from Facebook tomorrow morning. And then if you want to catch the replay, you'll have to go to our YouTube channel. But if you do, it's cool because I have a whole Kilimanjaro playlist on YouTube. So thanks so much for joining me tonight. I hope to see you all on a Hike Like a Woman adventure. And if not, I just hope to see you out on the trails. Thanks again. We'll catch you later. Bye-bye.